He was rejected by the very people who watched him grow up. They refused to believe in him, and he left that day without a home. So let's start now in Matthew 14, verse 1. When Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, heard about Jesus, he said to his advisors, "This must be John the Baptist raised from the dead. This is why he can do such miracles." For Herod had arrested and imprisoned John as a favor to his wife Herodias, the former wife of Herod's brother Philip. John had been telling Herod it is against God's law for you to marry her. And Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of a riot because all the people believed John was a prophet. But at a birthday party for Herod, Herodias' daughter performed a dance that greatly pleased him, so he promised with a vow to give her anything she wanted. At her mother's urging, the girl said, "I want the head of John the Baptist on a tray." Then the king regretted what he had said, but because of the vow he had made in front of his guests, he issued the necessary orders. So John was beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a tray and given to the girl, who took it to her mother. Later, John's disciples came for his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus what had happened. So in this, we see Herod Antipas was a wicked ruler at the time and was a part of a long line of wicked rulers. We would see his father, who was Herod the Great. Father Herod the Great, 30 years before, had already tried to kill Jesus at one point, when Jesus was just a couple of years old and he heard this prophecy about a coming king. And as Jesus was just a baby, he sought to murder this child, and he murdered every single child in Egypt. And it would be the future descendants and brothers of Herod now that would in the future be ones to persecute the church, to murder the Apostle James, and to continue to wreak havoc on this earth. And the thing about Herod Antipas is he was one who participated in Jewish culture when it was convenient to him, but he lived according to the world when he wanted to. He was divided. He had a foot in his religious identity and another one in the world. And because of this, he was left fearing the people too much to kill John right away, but he wanted to appease his new wife so badly that he imprisoned him. And the thing is that there are consequences, not just for yourself, but for others, to giving a part of yourself to your faith and a part of yourself to your own desires. We cannot serve two masters. Jesus told us that we will hate one and we will love the other. And the result of this division inside of Herod was not his own death. That came later. He was eventually exiled to Spain. But the result of this division was the death of somebody else, someone he even respected. Now in verse 13, as soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. But the crowds heard where he was headed and followed on foot from many towns. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So when Jesus hears this news about the passing of his cousin who prepared the way for him, he would have entered a serious mourning period. Mourning and grieving was a big deal for the Jews. It would have lasted 7 days at first, and Jesus would usually return home while abstaining from comforts like shaving and celebration. But Jesus didn't have a home to return to anymore. And at the same time, we learn from the Gospel according to Mark that all the disciples had just returned from their first mission trip. There's a lot going on. He has a lot on his plate, and he obviously desired to be alone at this point. But the crowd finds him. And what does he do? Does he go and run away more? No. He looks on them with compassion. It says he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So now this word right here, compassion in the Greek, it's splagmizomai. So go ahead and look at the person next to you and say spalizomai. I had to practice it. All right. Bless you. The word means to experience pity and with somebody's need, to sympathize with someone's needs so much that you feel to the core of yourself and you're overwhelmed towards action. Now, we typically hear this word compassion in our English language. We hear, oh, you meet somebody at a funeral and you say, "I'm so sorry for your loss. I have compassion on you," and it's words that you're saying to comfort someone. But words meant a lot more back in Jesus' day. This word meant to experience pity and to sympathize with someone's needs so much that you feel to the core of yourself. You feel it, yes, but you are overwhelmed towards action, like a key being put into the ignition and turning over the engine. This is a feeling that motivates to action. And I want to ask you, are you looking at others with this type of compassion? I want to ask you, are you aware that Jesus is looking at you right now with this kind of compassion that is motivating him to action and towards advocating for you to the Father right now. He didn't want to die, but he loved you so much that it drove him to tell God, not my will, but yours, and he took the steps towards the cross. Now that evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "That isn't necessary. You feed them." Not they feed them, you feed them. "But we only have 5 loaves of fish and 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here," he said. Then he told the people to sit down on the grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and blessed them. Now, despite his grief and exhaustion, Jesus takes the little that he's been given and he thanks God. Now, Noah, you brought up Colossians, right?
Yeah.
Would you go ahead and stand up, please, and read this section? Colossians chapter 1 that Noah's about to read is part of a prayer that Paul had for the church in Colossae. So would you go ahead and read that? Chapter 1, verses 11 and 12, please.
Being strengthened with all his power according to his glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share the inheritance of the saints in light.
Now I want to pay attention to a little point right there. Thank you so much, Noah. Endurance and patience, yet with joy, giving thanks to the Father. How often are we just getting through it? I think we all can have weeks and months where we are working very hard. You're doing endurance and patience great, but how often is it with joy and thanksgiving to the Father? It was the night before he was crucified that Jesus took bread in a very similar way to this, knowing exactly what was coming up in 24 hours. Yet he thanked his Father and he broke it, knowing what was waiting for him. And in doing that, he invited us to do the same. The Apostle Paul told us that in taking the bread and the cup, what we call communion, we take part in Jesus' death and his resurrection. And the reality is that to live without gratitude is to tell God that you deserve better. To look him right in the eyes and to say, you've either lied, God, you're a liar, or you have failed to keep your promise in telling me that you're going to provide what I need. The thing is, the greatest exercise of humility is daily thankfulness, finding the ways in which you are actively blessed today. And if the greatest exercise of humility is thankfulness, then the opposite is true. The opposite of that is true as well. And the absence of gratitude and thankfulness in your life is a heart seated with pride. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he gave the bread to the disciples who distributed it to the people. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. About 5,000 men were fed that day, in addition to all the women and the children. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake, while he sent the people home. So John's account gives us a little bit of a closer look into why Jesus was like, we need to get out of here. Apparently, after this miracle, everybody looked around and they were like, I'm going to take this guy by force and make him my king. So they were coming over to, like, I don't know, pick him up or something. And he's like, all right, guys, we got to get out of here. Let's go. And in verse 23, now, after sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. In the last 2 days, Jesus has now faced rejection from his own people, the death of his beloved cousin, and during that grieving, he broke bread with many people who were just there for a handout, for what he had to give. How would you have reacted in this situation now? The way Jesus reacts is he goes somewhere to be alone and to pray. He intentionally removes himself from the noise of life, and he seeks God's voice and his presence. He understood the difference between isolation and solitude, which is something that we tend to blend together so often. Because what is isolation? Isolation is coming to this point of exhaustion where you need to be alone, and we've all been there. But it's seeking distraction, it's seeking sleep, it's seeking anything just to turn off the rest of the world around you and to cut it all away. To cut off relationship is what isolation truly is. Yet what solitude is going to the quiet place. Which I said, we all need that quiet place sometimes. But it's recognizing that we're not alone. It's coming expectantly, knowing that God is going to show up there, knowing that you're not alone. Now, meanwhile, the disciples were in a trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" Now, this, on the other hand, is the wrong way to react to hard circumstances. There's a good idea and a bad idea. And this is when you have the same storm. This is not how you react. The disciples, these grown men, fishermen, probably pretty ripped, are so overcome by fear and anxiety that their Lord and Savior is walking towards them and they don't even recognize him. They see Beetlejuice or Casper out on the water. Is it possible that we can sometimes be so lost in fear, so lost? And what we're told is we're a generation of depression and anxiety and mental health issues. Can we be so lost in that we don't even recognize Jesus when he's working right in front of us? All we see is a ghost. And then in verse 27, it starts with these 2 words right here. It says, "But Jesus." This is a variation of one of my favorite words in the Bible. If I get like a tattoo right across, right here, it would say either "but Jesus," or more commonly we see "but God," all throughout the Bible. And what this is God coming in. This is divinity coming in as an interruption to the wickedness and sin and heartbreak of our lives here on earth. In comes divinity. We read this in Ephesians chapter 2. It says, "We were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind." Here it is. "But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved." In 2 Corinthians, "For every turn when we came into Macedonia, our bodies had no rest, but we were afflicted at every turn, fighting without and fear within. But God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus." And finally, in the book of Acts, when they had carried out all that was written of Jesus, they took him down from the tree and laid him in a tomb. But God raised him from the dead. And in this, but Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I'm here." He speaks. And now, Preston, you had brought up Isaiah 43, right? Would you go ahead and please read for us Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2?
"When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and the rivers will not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched, and the flame will not burn you."
Do you hear that? As you walk through the waters, he will be with you. The rivers, they will not overwhelm you. This is a promise that was true through the prophet Isaiah as God spoke to the people of Israel. This is a promise that was true as Jesus spoke out over the waters to his disciples, and it is a promise that is true and spoken to you today. Don't be afraid. Take courage. He's here. Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. There was a theologian in the 19th century named Alexander Balmain Bruce. Any of you guys know Alex? No? Okay, well, I'm Alex. He said about this right here, he said, "Peter walked on the water, but he feared the wind. And such is human nature, often achieving great things and at fault in the little things." The thing is, if Jesus is our perfect example on how to react to rejection and grief and exhaustion and fear, then Peter here is our perfect example in how to act when we fail to react correctly the first time. He cries out one of the shortest but most effective prayers. He says, "Save me, Lord." And Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me? You have so little faith. Why did you doubt me?" The Greek word for doubt is ditazo. I'm not going to make you say it this time. I'll take the hit. It means to be in 2 places at once, to be unable to decide. Jesus is looking at Peter in the eyes, and he's asking him to make a decision. Are you going to trust me or not? When we start to turn our attention to our fears and anxieties, we start looking at Jesus through a lens of our circumstances, rather than at our circumstances through the truth of who Jesus is. If you can wrap your head around Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you can wrap your head around the fact that Jesus came and he died on the cross and he rose 3 days later for you, then why are you doubting him now? When you have financial fears, when you're experiencing seasons of anxiety, it's okay, I understand, but why are you doubting him? If you'll trust him with coming back from the dead, why do you doubt? Now in verse 32, it says, when they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. I want to pause here for just a second. Because what do we notice about here? It says, when they climbed back into the boat, then the wind stopped. When Peter cried out, "Save me, Lord," did the wind stop? No. Jesus took Peter by the hand and they walked through the storm together. We find Jesus' final message to all of the disciples in the Gospel of John, in John 14 through 16. This is his speech at the end of the Last Supper. We call it the Upper Room Discourse. Makes it sound super fancy and cool. And in that, he makes 14 different promises. But the very last one he gives is at the very end of the very last verse in John 16. He says, "In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I've overcome the world." And the truth is that Jesus may not immediately calm the storm in your life. Even if you cry out, whether it be anxiety or grief or exhaustion, he might not come in and stop it. I can't promise that. But he will walk with you through the storm. He will be with you. You will not be alone. Call out and make your needs known to him. He's ready. Anna, would you please read Joshua 1:9?
Yes. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
Lord your God will be with you wherever you go, so don't be afraid. And the thing is, as we leave these doors, as we go to work and to school and even to our own homes after this, we will face trials and suffering. It's not that if we face trials and suffering, but when we face trials and suffering, how are we going to react? Are we going to react like Jesus and recognize that we're not alone? Or are we going to react like Peter and be afraid? And the thing is, sometimes we are going to react like Peter. Sometimes we are going to fail. Sometimes we're going to fall. But then what do? Do you get back up? Do you cry, "Save me, Lord. I need your help"? We must pray and be confident in God's presence. I'm going to go ahead and close now on these last few verses, verse 33 to 36. Then the disciples worshipped him. "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. And after they had crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret. When the people recognized Jesus, the news of his arrival spread quickly throughout the whole area. And soon people were bringing all their sick to be healed. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and all who touched him were healed. Do you think these people in Gennesaret knew about the storm Jesus had just walked through so that he could meet their needs? How often do we forget and live ignorant of the storms that Jesus has walked through to serve us? He would carry a 100-pound crossbeam on his back like this. It would be one of rough wood that would scratch and splinter his back that had already been ripped to shreds. From there, he would be lifted up on a cross. He would have nails driven into his wrists and feet. Typically, we see the nails driven through the hand, but it wasn't like that. Would you put up your hand and feel your wrist right here? Feel the two bones? The nail was driven between these two bones so that he would hang on his bones, intended for him to suffocate to death. He was beaten to the point that he was barely recognizable as a human. And after that, he gave up his spirit and died. But 3 days later, he would rise. 40 days later, he would rise to the right hand of the Father where he is seated now. And he invites us to do the same. He invites us to take part both in his death and his resurrection and to spend eternity with him. We're going to go ahead and after this enter into a time of worship. We're going to go through some songs, and I'd like to invite the worship team to come up and join me up here, but let's go ahead and anticipate and expect his presence together. Lord, we thank you so much for this night, for all the blessings and mercy that you've poured out to us already. Lord, I thank you so much for being here in this room with us. I pray that we would be made aware of your Spirit filling this room, and we would rest upon the solid rock that is the truth, that you are here, that you are with us, and that we're not alone. I thank you so much for the work that it took for that to happen, for the sacrifice that you made so that we could have right relationship with you, God. I pray that if any of us need to turn to you again, need to cry out to you, save me, Lord, I pray that we would let go of all pride and that we would simply cry out to you and say, God, I need your help. Lord, help us to love you more. We need to be taught that, God. Teach us to love you more. Teach me to love you more, God. Thank you for your blessings. In your name, amen. Thank you guys so much.